Hi everyone, I am going to show you what a secure enclave is. When we work with government customers who need to meet certain compliance requirements, for example, customers that are Department of Defense subprime contractors who need to meet the Department of Defense Cybersecurity Maturity Model Level 2, which is essentially NIST 800-171. If you're familiar with the NIST security frameworks, there's both technical requirements and there's business requirements. And a lot of customers who have enterprises, I'll give you two examples: enterprises and small businesses. Okay, small to medium businesses. Let's take the enterprise first. The larger customer that's it's got a lot of 365 commercial stuff already, maybe has stuff in Azure, that type of thing. But all of a sudden, they've got a part of their company that has to meet this requirement for the Department of Defense. Well, to go through CMMC Level 2 compliance, or NIST 800-171 compliance, it's a very daunting task. One, it's a lot of things for them to learn. It's a lot from, there's a big employee impact because you're having to take your commercial environment and migrate it to a government environment. And that's a full migration in the Microsoft world. Think Microsoft Teams and SharePoint sites and OneDrives and all the sharing links that are all created out there, and migrating users from one tenant to another, all their devices from one tenant to another, all the Intune policies or Defender deployments, all of those things that you would have in a 365 environment that would be deployed commercially, you have to completely redeploy from the ground up in the government environment because it's a full migration from one environment to the other. And with Azure, if you have things in Azure, you're actually taking snapshots of disk because you're migrating everything from Azure to Azure, and it's a complete rebuild of everything from scratch. So it's a very disruptive thing to have to go through that process. And that's one of the benefits of that's a primary benefit of secure enclaves, is we don't have to touch any of that. We go over and we build from the beginning a environment specifically designed for the part of your organization, the company's organization, that has to work with CUI, or classified, or the part of your organization that has to work with the confidential information. CUI just doesn't come to my mind. Confidential, unclassified information. There we go. Got it. I had to think about it for a second. But the part of your organization that works with that confidential information, now we can just put them into a secure enclave. So I'm going to show you what a secure enclave looks like. Let me flip screens here. This is what a secure enclave looks like, and the way that we typically architect this. Now, we can do a combination. I talk about this in the sense of Azure virtual desktops or Microsoft 365 cloud PCs, which aren't in Azure Gov yet. But this can also be done with AWS. And I'm going to throw that out there right now just so you understand that. But essentially what we do is we start with a box, okay? And that box is where your cloud infrastructure is going to be living within, okay? And we build a brand new Windows Active Directory from the ground up, so we don't have to touch any existing Active Directories that are there. And then within that, we'll have a virtual network that will be specifically for virtual desktops. In this case, I'm showing Azure virtual desktops, but this could also be AWS workspaces. Azure virtual desktops are nice because they're true Windows 10 PCs. So things like OneDrive works like it should with the smart syncing capabilities. Applications typically don't have a problems with installs. Sometimes with server operating systems, like you get with Amazon Workspaces, applications don't work right, or you have more problems with them. Drivers can have more problems. It can be a little more challenging to work with a server operating system because it's more like remote desktop services. Things can be a little more challenging to work in that space versus a Windows 10 space. So that's why we typically prefer Azure Virtual Desktop, because it's truly Windows 10. And then off to the side, we can have another network that is for application servers or file servers or whatever you need within that environment. But the nice thing about this box is nothing comes into the box. The box is isolated. There's no VPNs into this box. Because the moment you establish a VPN, whether it be a client VPN or a site-to-site VPN, whatever's at the other end of that VPN has to be compliant also. And that's where you run into issues, because client VPNs are like the second most dangerous thing you can have in an environment, next to, email is the most common threat vector. Client VPNs is the second most common threat vector when it comes to cyber attacks. So we keep this box tight and closed. And that's how we build these environments very, very quickly, because it is a tight box. Now, you can do things with Azure and Intune where you can create an Azure Virtual Network Gateway to do client VPNs, and then create conditional access policies that restrict a client from connecting to the VPN unless the device is Intune joined and compliant. So you can validate the device at the other end, and that's key. So there are ways to do it. Meaning having a client VPN into the environment, and doing it securely and maintaining your CMMC compliance requirements for the NIST 800-171 compliance. So there are ways to do it, but it adds to the complexity, and it's a different user experience. So the easiest ways to do it is just like I'm showing right here with a secure box, a 365. A Windows Active Directory. Your virtual desktops, and any files or application servers you want to store things in. When you come into an Azure Virtual Desktop, the Microsoft is doing all the brokerage services. If you're familiar with remote desktop services, there's a brokerage servers and all the connectivity. Well, Microsoft does all of that for you. So all you're doing is maintaining the AVD environment, the Azure Virtual Desktop environment, and you really don't have to worry about any of the brokerage services. Microsoft handles all that, and it's all in their GovCloud, so it's all compliant. It meets all the security components that you need to have to meet your compliancies. And so really doesn't matter what the endpoint is connecting to it. So it can be existing corporate device, it can be a personal PC, it could be an iPad, it could be whatever, can fire up a browser and is a supported operating system by AVD. So that's the beauty of it. And then also part of NIST 800-171, you have to monitor all traffic coming in and out of the environment. It has to be IDS, IPS coming in and out of the environment, anti-malware scanning, and all that type of thing. Web filtering is not a requirement, but the malware or the antivirus and the IDS, IPS is. And that's why you have to have a firewall if you have one of these types of environments or compliancy requirements. Then the next side of it is your I'll call it groupware or your Microsoft 365 cloud. That's going to be in the Microsoft's Government Compliant Cloud, GCC, and you have GCC, what I call low and high. In GCC, you still have collaborative features capabilities, meaning you can invite external guests and do that type of thing. So you can have commercial guests in your environment. But with GCC High, you can't. You can only collaborate with other GCC High customers. So that's kind of one of those gotchas about GCC that you have to be aware of. GCC High. The other thing is, from a security perspective, because you're using Microsoft 365, you can, and you're using a firewall with a known IP, a static IP address assigned to it, you can create a conditional access policy that says, hey, I don't want to allow anyone to connect to their email on their mobile phone, right, to this GCC High environment, because now their mobile phone or their PC with Outlook on it, right, connecting to a GCC High environment, a highly compliant environment, now has to meet CMMC-2, right? So now you're touching the device, right, again. So what customers will do is they'll say, okay, we want to lock this down tight and be fully compliant and have control of our data. So therefore, people who work with this type of data, for these compliancies have to log into their virtual desktop and only can access 365 from their virtual desktop. So you do an IP restriction with a conditional access policy to Microsoft 365 that only allows connections from that firewall, through that firewall. So nothing from the outside world can log into that tenant. That really makes it security tight wise, and it helps to control the data tightly. Now, yes, data can still be emailed in and out, right? But again, you can tighten that down with data loss prevention policies that say, hey, if there's an attachment on an email, send it over to someone that has to authorize that. If someone creates a new share link, that has to be approved. So there's things that you can do to really make it tight within the environment. And then because you have a firewall, you can also provide IP restricted access to organizations that you work with. We have customers that just to get an RFP, just to bid on something, they have to be coming from a known IP address. So you have to submit that you've got your SPURS score and your CMMC compliance, and provide the IP address that you're going to be connecting from, and then the authentication with that. Who's the user? The user has to get MFA set up and with this environment. So it's very, very tight. So this allows you to do that with that type of environment. We can also prevent internet access, restrict internet access, because we've got a firewall again, right? We can really say, hey, you can't talk to anyone other than 365 services or to this destination IP address. We can really lock down what someone working in this environment can access. So that's what a secure enclave looks like from a very high level. So those are some of the benefits that you see with a secure enclave, and customers love these because they're fast to implement. You're doing it from scratch. Your IT staff doesn't have to learn anything new. And then we can either manage that for them, or we can train their IT staff to do it, or we can do the hybrid thereof. They can do certain things, we can do certain things from a management perspective of the environment. So it makes it a really nice, simple, relatively easy to implement package, because we do these all the time. And it makes it really easy to get to your compliancy requirements. So customers that are businesses that have to meet this compliance requirement to maintain their contracts, to maintain that business with the Department of Defense as a subprime contractor, or a subprime of a subprime of a subprime. I make this widget. It makes it easy, and you don't have to impact your entire organization when you implement this. So that's Secure Enclave. I'll stop there. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Have a great day.